And actually, we will start with a very simple authentication mechanism, which is a password-based authentication. So I think all of you have a very rich experience in this kind of user authentication, but you may not be aware of the back end of the password authentication system. For example, how does operating system like Windows, Unix store and compare the user password, and what are some general attacks that can be applied in password authentication, and what are the prevention mechanisms, and so on. Alright, so we will look at what is authentication, the definition, and then some basis. For example, some authentication factors we can use in different authentication systems. And then we will look at some concepts like false positive and false negative. So these are basically the error in that can occur in authentication. So false positive means you have you give a wrong credential, but you can still authenticate. But false negative means you give the correct. Maybe you provide the correct authentication factor, but you are denied by the system. Alright, so then we will look at this password-based authentication. We will look at some general attacks, and then how to prevent those attacks. In particular, we will look at the storage of password. So actually, we don't store the plain password. We store a transformed password. We will use something called a hash function. So in 361, we will study the details of the hash function. But in this subject, we only use the hash function as a tool. And the security properties of hash function is they are related to these concepts like false positive and false negative. So later we will see why, for example, the one-wayness or so-called pre-image resistance and also the collision resistance can be related to a false positive and a false negative. And then we just actually, beside the hashing, sometimes we will also do the so-called sorting. So this is another technique used by the Unix system to store the user password. Alright, so we will also look at some attacks that can be performed against the password authentication. For example, in assignment 1, you will need to implement a so-called rainbow table. So rainbow table is some computed hash table that will allow the user to the attacker to quickly identify the user password. So we will look at how it works, and then I will explain what you need to implement in the assignment 1, in the programming part. Okay, so now let's, so we will have a break in the middle, probably. So we will just first look at some general concepts and some definitions related to authentication. So first, what is user authentication? So authentication, as I mentioned just now, is identifying the identity of the user. So we want to know who the user is, whether the user is legitimate or not, and who the user is. So that's the first step we need to do before actually we can do other security mechanisms. So, right. So if whenever you want to log into a system, basically you first need to do a user authentication. For example, if you want to go to your internet banking, or even if you want to use Wi-Fi network here, so you need to provide your username, password. So this is basically where we do the user authentication. Right. So the server, for example, providing the service, will need to first verify this is a legitimate user, and then the server will decide what the user can do after the identity of the user is recognized. So that means we can only do access control or other security mechanisms after we perform the authentication. So there are different ways we can perform authentication, and this forms the basis or the factors for authentication. So some common factors include, for example, a password, which is something you know, right? So a password or secret, which is something you know, and then something you have, right? For example, you can have a mobile phone, or you can have a smart card. So the smart card allows the user to, for example, enter a room when you scan the smart card or the RFID card by a reader. So in this case, you have a physical object. So this is something you have, right? So, and then you can also use biometric information, for example, your fingerprint or your voice, right? So to do this authentication. So actually, some more advanced biometric authentication mechanism, including like the signal. So detecting by like collecting of the signal like generated by your brain, actually we can also do authentication. So there are some research. There is some research performed in this kind in more advanced like authentication based on like our brain signal. So actually this is a quite interesting research area. So I just hosted a researcher from Europe. So what he did is actually he produced some device that can be wear by the user. So the user has a wear device, and then the device actually will detect the signal generated by the brain. So in this case, you don't need to physically like enter the password. So you can just do a so-called silent talk. So you can just silently think about something, some secret. Then actually the signal actually will identify the user. So even the different users, they silently think about, silently talk something, some like the same sentence or same secret. Actually, the signal is different because each one actually will generate a different signal by the brain. So that's some more advanced authentication actually we can use. So this is based on biometric. So the common biometric authentication we use actually. So for example, if you use you want to log into your smartphone, you can use your fingerprint, right? And sometimes we also use a voice or face recognition to enter a system. So that's biometric. And then where the entity is, for example, if you are using a particular machine inside the internet, then you can directly access the resource. You can directly connect to a server if you are one of the machines within the internet. But if you say you are like, in this case, authentication is done, for example, by IP address. So if we know this IP address is the internal IP address, then the user actually can directly access. But if you are the external user, then probably you need to first establish a VPN, right? So after you establish a VPN, actually the external machine will be treated as an internal machine. So in this case, you can also access the resource. So this is basically another type of authentication, and then who the entity knows. So this is also something used in like social networks. For example, if you want to reset a password, sometimes the system will ask you to provide the information of a few of your friends in your social network, and then only when all of them actually like send a response, say, okay, this they basically they try to certify this is the particular user, then actually the user is allowed to retrieve the password or reset the password. So in this case, we use maybe our social network as an authentication factor. So we can use different types of mechanisms or a combination of them to do authentication. So if we want to have like a higher level of security, we can use two-factor or multi-factor authentication, right? Two-factor authentication. Nowadays, if you do the e-banking, so the common two-factor authentication will require both password and also a device. So you can have like an EDS, you will receive a token. So the token, you will generate a one-time password, right? Every time you press the token, it will generate a one-time password. You need to use your permanent password, long-term password, together with one-time password to log in. So some other systems, they use like a mobile phone. Like in Australia, actually, we don't use this kind of hardware token, we use mobile phone. Every time we want to perform we want to log in, we need to type in our password, and then I will receive a one-time password through my mobile phone, and then I can use a one-time password to log in. So this is like a two-factor authentication. And then if we look at the ATM card we use, that's also a two-factor authentication mechanism, because you need to know the PIN, and also you need to physically have the card if you want to withdraw money. Otherwise, if you only have the password or you only have the card, you cannot withdraw the money. So that's also two-factor authentication. So we can use different ways to do authentication to identify this user. So we can use, in general, we can use all the mechanisms, all the factors presented in the previous slide. But the three common ones we use include something you have, right? So something you know and something you are. So these are the big three. So these are the three common methods we use for authentication. And then today we will mainly focus on something you know, so the password. And then next class we will look at a combination of different factors. So something you know, something you have, something you are, and we can have different combinations. And we will look at some examples we use in reality to do multi-factor authentication. Right, so the authentication is related to the term credential. Okay, so the credential is something we use to prove our identity. So in general, we have the identifier credential. That means some object that allows people to recognize the identity recognize our identity. So another credential that can also be used for different purposes is a so-called authorization credential, right? So in basically for the network security and system security, we can have different credentials, right? So we can have this public key certificate, which is like some sort of identity credential, and then we can also have the attribute certificate, which is for authorization, right? So, however, sometimes we will also see some inaccurate or ambiguous definition of credential. So these are some other definitions which actually are not recommended. So if we see all these definitions are from this RFC. So RFC stands for request for comment. So these are all the some standards, security standard or other standard related to internet technology. So if you go to this IETF website, you can find all the RFCs, and then this RFC is for basically the terms that will occur in other standard. So actually, credential is a term that will occur in different authentication and authorization systems. However, so in that document, they also provide some so-called deprecated definition. That means that these definitions, although they are specified in some standard documents, but we should avoid using such kind of definition because they are ambiguous and inaccurate. Right. So in English, actually, credential basically is something that can support a claim of identity or authorization. Right. So this is basically the normal plain English definition of a credential. But anyway, so this is just to give you some general idea. So how we basically use how we define the information we use to pass authentication or to authorization. Right. So for the authentication, we have two important concepts. So password, basically, if we use either password or biometric or even other authentication factor, we can always have these two errors. One is called a false positive, one is called false negative. So these are the two types of error that can occur when we do authentication. So no matter which authentication mechanism you use, so we can have this kind of errors. For example, so when you use your fingerprint to log into iPhone, sometimes actually it will be denied. So even if you use a correct finger, you will be denied. So in this case, actually, we have the so-called false negative. And then sometimes, so although this is less likely, but theoretically this is possible. Someone may use a wrong password to log into your account, right? So this is called a false positive. So these two concepts actually not only appear in authentication, but later we will see they appear in other systems as well. So for example, even when we do a medical check, we can have the false positive and false negative. And then in intrusion detection, of course, like an antivirus, we can also have these kind of errors, right? So false in these systems, for example, the intrusion detection system in IDS, so false positive now has a different meaning because the context is different. Well, it means that actually we give a false alarm. So there is no intrusion, but the system gives a false alarm. So false negative means that there is intrusion, but we we didn't receive any alarm from the intrusion detection system. So this kind of errors can happen in different systems, including many security systems. Okay, so false positive, as I mentioned, this occurs when we make a match, but we shouldn't have. So in authentication, that means someone may use a wrong credential. So now I use the term credential instead of a password because depending on the factor you use. So if you use a wrong credential, you can still pass authentication. That means you have a false positive. As I mentioned just now, so if you use a fingerprint to unlock your smartphone, sometimes you can have so this is false negative. So sometimes actually if you use for false positive, so sometimes maybe you can have a wrong credential, then the student, the system will still accept this wrong credential. So we will see why this can happen, for example, in password-based authentication. Right, so in biometric, actually this can also happen if the system is not really accurate. Because in biometric authentication, usually you need to do a registration. For example, you register your fingerprint or you register your face, right? So in this case, so the database will, the system will collect your biometric data and then store in the database. And then later, when you do authentication, it will collect another pattern, the current pattern collected from the user. So then they will do the matching between the two patterns. So now in this case, both false positive and false negative can happen. So for example, if say this is actually the data collected from the right user, just like the example of unlock your smartphone. So this is from the correct user's fingerprint. Now, because the measurement maybe is there is some issue. For example, your hand is not there is like dirt in your hand, in your finger. So when the fingerprint is collected, actually there are a lot of errors. Then actually the matching fails. In this case, you have a false negative. Sometimes, say if the accuracy level is very low, so even you collect a different a sample. But in this case, even the sample is wrong, but you still have a match. Then in this case, you have a false positive. So in biometric authentication, so you can have both false positive and false negative, depending on the matching, whether the accuracy of this matching and also whether there is any errors during the collection of the information. Right. So for password-based authentication, actually, we will have a false positive. False negative is less likely, but we will have false positive because actually we don't store the plain password in the, for example, in your PC, in your Unix or Windows system. We don't store the plain password. We store a transformed password. So in this case, there is a chance that two different passwords after the transformation they become the same. So in this case, if you use a wrong password, you may still be able to log into the account. So that's where false positive can occur in password-based system. Right. So this can also happen. So in later when we see like malware or intrusion detection, we can also have false positive. But actually from the user's view, the two the effect of false positive and false negative can be quite different. So in authentication, user will be aware of false negative. That means when actually user uses a correct credential but denied by the system, then user will be aware. In the intrusion detection or antivirus systems, user will be aware of false positive. That means when actually there is no intrusion or no malware, when there is no malware, but this intrusion detection or anti-malware system, they give alarm, then we will be aware of this kind of false positive. So depending on context, so sometimes we will have in authentication when user will be aware of the false negative, but in intrusion detection or antivirus systems, users will be aware of false positive. Right? So these are the two errors that can occur in different security systems. Okay, so now let's look at, so basically, as I said, for password-based systems, actually, we will have a false positive. So for the false positive, we have the so-called false acceptance rate. So this is the FAR. That means the false positive that will be accepted by the system. And then FRR is for false negative, the false rejection rate. That means the valid login request or authentication request that will be rejected by the system. So later we will see actually, as I mentioned, FAR, the false positive, actually makes sense when we actually store the transform the password instead of the plain password. So now let's look at the password-based authentication. So this mechanism is widely used. So we use password authentication almost every day. So when you want to log into your system, when you want to log into your computer, or you want to log into your email account or bank account and so on. So we use password every day. However, so password-based authentication is actually the weakest, actually one of the weakest methods for authentication. The reason why this is the weakest because password actually they are very weak in terms of security strength. Because the space of the password actually is quite limited. The password space usually is not sufficient to withstand many attacks. Or later we will see there are different types of attacks, like the brute force attack, dictionary attack, rainbow table attack, and so on. So all these attacks are based on the weakness of the password. So because password actually they are quite, the number of possible passwords they are quite limited. Right. So this is although this is very a weak authentication mechanism, but this is the most convenient mechanism for authentication. So that's why we still use this one. However, so nowadays we try to use password-based authentication together with some other authentication mechanism that can basically somehow address the limitation of password. So this is how usually a password system works. So you need to register an account, you need to provide a password. So the system sometimes will give you some specific rules. So you need to have a capital letter, lowercase letter, special symbols, numbers, and so on. Right? So then after you register account, then you can basically log into the account. Of course, you may also need to provide some other information, for example, an email account or some questions, the answers to some questions, so that later you can reset your password. Right? So after you do the registration, you do the authentication using password, and when you want to reset your password, you need to either use your email address or account, or you need to answer the security questions and so on. So this is how the password system works. And then the authentication, the second step actually is done by basically a matching, whether the user, the supplied information matches the information stored in the security database, right? So if the information supplied actually match what is expected, then the user is authenticated. So here actually, so the matching depends on actually what is stored in the database of the system. So it's not based on what the user is supplied. So it's based on what is stored in the database. So in this case, if the stored information is not a plain password, then we can have the so-called false positive. Because if the stored information is a transformed password, then it is possible that you can have different password which will have the same produce the same transformed password. So in this case, we have a false positive. Right. So but it's less likely you provide the same password, then you produce different transformed password. It's less likely. So in general, we can have a false positive if we use a transformed password instead of a plain password. All right, so we will look at some problems, security problems related to password. Many of these are common sense. So if you look at these problems, actually they don't require any math or any advanced knowledge. So password guessing, password exposure, and then Trojan horse, like the keyloggers. And then poor password is where we will focus on. So these are some methods that actually some straightforward methods that can be used to compromise the password system. But so they depend on basically the user, like behavior, user habit, and so on. However, so how to select a good password? This is something actually we can study, we can improve in order to prevent some other attacks. So we will look at the attacks. For example, the diction attack. So this is a particular attack against the password because password has a so-called low entropy. We will have a very small space for the password. Then we can build a dictionary to capture that all the possible passwords. So this is the so-called diction attack. So brute force attack. So basically, if you know the space of the password, you can use the dictionary. But if you don't know the space, you can use the so-called brute force attack. And then you can also have hybrid attack, right? So hybrid attack is a combination of diction attack and brute force attack. Then for all these attacks, actually, for the dictionary brute force, you can also have the so-called online and offline attack. So the online attack actually is less serious, less critical than offline attack, right? So we will look at the difference. Password guessing, this is quite straightforward. So you just make a random guess about password. For example, if you know the student account, your classmate account, then you can just randomly pick a password and then try to log into the account. So this is a quite straightforward attack. So, but this can be prevented actually quite easily. So the normal prevention is to limit the number of failed logins. So if you have a particular account has say 5 consecutive failed logins, then the account will be locked. So in this case, we can easily prevent this kind of password guessing. Right. So but this can be although we can stop the attacker from logging into the account, but this can also be used by attacker to launch denial of service attack. So if I want to lock your account, I can just type in the wrong password 5 times, then your account will be locked, right? So anyway, so we will look at denial of service later. So password exposure, this is another very straightforward problem. So because nowadays we use a lot of different passwords, so sometimes the password users may write down their password, maybe in a piece of paper or in a file. So in this case, actually, if someone can access that information, then that paper, piece of paper, or that file, then all the password will be exposed. And then if you type in your password, actually, someone may just stand behind your shoulder and then watch your the password you entered. So in some study, actually, it has been demonstrated. So even if you use your ATM when you type in your password, actually by monitoring the movement of your elbow, so actually people can identify what is a password entered by the user. So someone has done some study to illustrate actually this kind of attack is possible. So password exposure is basically a problem when we have someone who can observe observe the process that the user enters a password. Okay, so the Trojan horse, this is another threat. So this is about keyloggers. So Trojan horse, this is one of the topics we will study in malware, but it can be linked to authentication because Trojan horse can actually do a lot of later we will see Trojan horse actually can do a lot of malicious activities, not just the keylogger. So later it can also used by phishing attacks or other attacks. Because of Trojan horse, actually, it can, once the Trojan horse is installed in your machine, then actually, so for the authentication, the keylogger basically is to log all the keyboard keystroke done by the user. So basically, this can be done actually in a very accurate way. So for example, the Trojan horse can detect whenever the user opens a particular address, or whenever the user accesses a particular system, like a web bank e-banking system, then the Trojan horse will enable the, for example, the keylogger. And sometimes this is difficult to detect. For example, the Trojan horse is embedded in a game. So because the game has some similar, in computer games, we have some like a similar function as a keylogger. Because when you play the game, actually the game needs to recognize your keystroke as well, right? So when you enter some keys, the game will need to recognize. And the behavior is very similar to the keylogger. So if you embed the keylogger in a game, sometimes actually we cannot detect there is a keylogger inside. But the keylogger actually can now basically capture what the user typed in the keyboard. And Trojan horse can also capture, for example, sometimes they can also capture the screen in order to steal the user password if they use some other mechanism. For example, some systems, they don't let the user type the password using keyboard. They will display a keyboard on the page, right? They display a visual keyboard, and then you need to press those, using the mouse to press those keys in this keyboard. And then Trojan horse actually can still basically do the capturing. So they can do the screen capture in order to recognize what are the keys typed by the user. Right. So these are some attacks that can be used against the password. And however, in general, so later we will see actually the more like critical or dangerous attacks are related to the quality of the password. So the reason of those attacks, the possibility of those attacks is due to the so-called low entropy of the password. So in general, so if we choose a password, the number of possibilities actually is quite limited. So suppose you choose just like a PIN, for your ATM card, so you choose 6 digits, that's only like 1 million possibilities. And even if you choose some secure password, actually the possibility is still quite limited compared with cryptographic key. So the strength of the password is usually very weak. So that's a major problem in password systems. Although the previous attacks can also basically compromise the password, but the main problem of a password-based system is the quality of basically the secret. So in this case, the entropy or the amount of uncertainty in the password is quite low. So in this case, we have different types of attacks, like dictionary attack, brute force attack, and so on. Because even the limited number of possible passwords, attacker can enumerate the possible password and then try to identify which is the correct password. Right. So, however, so we cannot address this problem by simply using the password without any additional assistance, because the reason is that our human memory actually is very constrained. So we cannot really memorize very long random strings. We can memorize structured strings, but we cannot memorize very long random strings. For the structured strings, actually, although you can produce a very long password, but actually the total amount of possibility is still very limited. So in this case, the attacker can still basically enumerate all the possibilities. Alright, so in order to prevent, so basically if we want to address this problem, we need to use some other factors to enhance the security. Alright, so anyway, so although we have some limitations, but we can still try our best to improve the quality of the password. So before we look at how we can improve the quality, we will look at some particular attacks. So the first one is dictionary attack. So dictionary attack is quite straightforward. So even that attacker, because each system, actually they will have some rules for the password. So based on those rules, actually we can define a dictionary. So the dictionary can contain all the possible passwords. Right? So for example, for the ATM card, actually we know the dictionary for like a 6-digit password, we only have 1 million possibilities, right? From 60 to 69. So that's these are the like all the possible passwords we can use. So in this case, we can build a dictionary which contains all the 6-digit numbers. And then for other systems, we can build some similar like a dictionary. So here, dictionary may not just mean like English dictionary or a dictionary for a particular alphabet. We can have like a dictionary for all the numbers, all the digits, and so on. So as far as the attacker knows the scope, like the domain of the password, they can build a dictionary. And then after they build a dictionary, and once they get some additional information about password, they can check against each possible password in the dictionary. Right? So this is the dictionary attack. So for example, if somehow the password table in the system is stolen by the attacker, so the attacker now gets some transformed password. Now the attacker can basically check against the whole dictionary one by one. So you do a transformation for each password. If the transformed password match what you like obtained from the password table, then you know you get the correct password. Right? So in this case, we can break the system by just checking the possible password one by one. Right? So in general, so dictionary, although we can build like a dictionary containing all the possible passwords, and sometimes the attacker actually will use some tailored dictionary. So this is in conjunction with so-called social engineering. So basically, the attacker, if we have a specific target, we may predict the password from some information we know about this target. For example, if I know this guy is very interested in a particular type of sport, right? For example, basketball or like tennis and so on. And then there is like a favorite like a sport superstar in that like a particular sport. And then so in this case, actually sometimes you can predict, for example, the password. You can reduce the number of possible passwords by looking at the information you can collect from a particular person. So we call such kind of attack the tailored dictionary attack, because in general, people will not really choose a pure random password. So if you think about the password you chose, actually there are still some like information related to your like life, right? So you don't really choose a pure random password. So that's why actually by doing social engineering, we can reduce the space, we can reduce the size of the dictionary. So in this case, we can have this so-called tailored dictionary attack. So we don't generate the whole list of possible password, but we generate a specific subset of the password. So in UW, in one of the labs, we do such a kind of attack. So actually, you may be surprised if you really perform such an attack. So in general, basically, I assume, for example, I pretend to be someone, and then I pick some password, and then I ask you to ask me some question. For example, you are doing a survey or something, so you can ask me some question. And then basically I will answer your question. And then in the lab, we have like in each lab we have a 30+ student. And the student will ask some questions, then we will answer the question using all those questions are normal questions. So we don't allow students to directly ask, what's your password? What's your previous password? So we don't allow this kind of question. So they can ask, for example, where do I graduate? So how old are you? How old I am? Then what's the date of birth? So what's my date of birth? So what's my favorite animal? What's my favorite sport? What's the information about my children? Where do they attend school? So they ask all this information. So this kind of question can appear in the survey, in general like a survey. So, but you may be surprised actually, even if I choose some random password from, not truly random, some password I randomly combine from different sources. So I combine this piece, that piece, a third piece, I combine it to form a password. Actually, in general, it takes 20 to 30 minutes for the students to locate the password. So every time, actually, the student can locate the password by asking those questions. So actually, this kind of social engineering attack is quite powerful. You should not underestimate this kind of attacks. So by actually asking those questions, the student, every time actually they can successfully identify the password. Even I randomly pick different pieces, combine them together. So the reason is I don't actually choose a truly random password. I combine some piece. For example, this is my favorite band. Okay, so maybe this is like some information related to my children. So I randomly combine them, but actually the student, they can still identify the password. So this is basically the tailored addiction attack. So that's something actually we should be careful when we try to do some surveys and so on. So that's why also why when some hacker can collect user information, so those information can be sold to the attackers, because the attacker may do this kind of tailored password attack. Attacker may also perform some tailored phishing. So the phishing can also be tailored based on the information known by the attacker. So anyway, so that's about the tailored password attack. Then brute force, this is basically another straightforward attack. So we assume the attacker knows nothing. So the attacker has no information. Attacker even does not know the space. For example, attacker even does not know how the password is, like what are the rules to form the password. In this case, we can use brute force. Brute force, essentially, you just try all the possibilities. Right, so in general, so the brute force attack can always locate the password. It is just a matter of time. So if we give the attacker sufficient time and sufficient resource, then basically the attacker can locate the password for sure using brute force. However, so to defend this kind of attack, so the one mechanism is basically to change your password frequently. So every 3 months or every 5 months, you need to change the password. So this is the only way that can prevent the brute force attack. Because brute force, if you keep a static password forever, and the brute force basically will just do all the possible, do the search for all the possible strings. In this case, it's just a matter of time to find your password. Okay, so how to measure the security or the strength of the password? So actually we have some simple mathematics and some simple definitions that can be used. So basically we can determine the strength of password by looking at the size of the password space. How many possible passwords that can be generated in that space, and then basically we can then look at the speed of the computer or the speed of the attacker for enumerate the password. For example, if you have 1 million possibilities and the attacker can test 1,000 passwords in 1 second using a computer, so then we can easily identify. So how long the attacker will take to enumerate all the possible passwords. So in the worst case, you will need to n divided by r, so such a time, right? So the n is the number of possible passwords, I is basically the number of password that can be tested by the attacker. But the expected time actually is only half of the worst case. So this is the worst case for the attacker, and then the expected is half of this worst case. Right, so to give you some rough idea, so if you say consider a randomly generated password of length 8, and each item, each character is a random lowercase letter from A to Z. Right, so in this case, actually we can calculate what are the total possible, what's the size of the password space, what are the possible password, what is the number of possible passwords. So in this case, we have 26 to the power of 8. Because we have 8 partitions, right? 8 partitions, each partition has 26 possibilities, so we have 26 to the power of 8. And then if we assume that the attacker can test 1,000 password in a second, then we can simply calculate the time. So when you use this number divided by this 1,000, you will get a time of 6.6 years. Although this, so this is like an artificial example. So nowadays, actually, the attacker can do password testing in a much faster rate. So in particular, if you use GPU, actually you can do the password testing very quickly because GPU can do the testing in parallel, right? So, but this is just an artificial example to illustrate the strength of a password, right? So in this case, basically, if you know it takes 6.6 years to enumerate all the possible passwords, then basically you need to make sure you will change the password before this, well before this time, because you know that if you keep the password for such a time, then attacker basically can find the password. But you need to make sure that you will change password well before this time. Okay. So if you basically, so here shows some way actually you can strengthen the password. So if you add now basically you use a password over 10 digits and upper and lowercase letters. So basically you enlarge the space. So now you allow the eight characters to be chosen either from the set of 10 digits or the upper and the lowercase letters. Then actually the password space will be increased by the factor of about 1,000. So this illustrates if you choose different combinations for the characters, then you can enlarge the space. Right. So the previous examples are just some rough idea about the password space and the speed for the attacker to detect the password or to locate the password. So the formal term to describe the strength of password is the so-called password entropy. So entropy is a very important term used in information theory. So in information theory, so entropy is basically the amount of information or amount of uncertainty, or you can say amount of randomness. So if you have no randomness, no uncertainty, then you don't have any entropy. For example, suppose I pick a password. Say, I always pick a password start from SIM. SIM, I follow something else. So someone actually will pick password in this way. They have a fixed prefix. They have some fixed terms, for example, in front or at the end, and then they choose some dynamic characters in a subsequent part of the password. So in this way, actually, this is not a good way to pick password because the fixed part actually does not carry a lot of entropy. So in particular, if this fixed part is known, then it carries no entropy, right? So if this fixed part is known by people, then it carries no entropy because there is no uncertainty inside this fixed string, right? So the entropy basically is a number of basically possible possible passwords. This is entropy is basically a log base 2 of the number of possible passwords. So if you have a number of possible passwords equal to n, then entropy is measured by log base 2 n. Right? So basically we measure the entropy in terms of bits because we are basically looking at the number of decisions we need to make in order to locate the correct password. Right? So if we look at the possible password, there are n possible passwords. So every time we can make a decision, right? At least when we make a decision, basically we have a yes or no, right? So that's why we use log base 2 to determine the entropy of the password. And then later, so actually we will also see that so to calculate the entropy, basically you need to look at so here you need to eliminate all the fixed items in the password. Also, the password may have very long string. It does not mean the password has a high entropy. As I mentioned, if you have a fixed part, the part is always fixed. Only the remaining parts it is dynamic. Then the fixed part carries no entropy. For example, if you have some, every time if you like put a fixed character at the end of the password, you use the same fixed character, maybe special character. Actually, that one does not really carry entropy because there is no randomness or uncertainty in that particular part. Okay, so this is a cartoon illustrating the idea of entropy. So the result is quite surprising. So this is a so-called strong password. Usually we choose, right? So it contains upper and lowercase letters, numbers, special characters, and so on. So this password will be satisfied by most of the password systems. However, if you measure the entropy of this password, it's really not that high. So even for such a complex password, the entropy actually is only 28, right? So this kind of password may be difficult to memorize, but actually the entropy is not really that high. But if you look at this one, so if you randomly choose 4 words from the dictionary, so surprisingly, actually this one will have a higher entropy. However, so you need to make sure you choose these words randomly. So if you choose a well-known sentence, that does not count. It will provide high entropy only when you choose words randomly from the dictionary, right? So if you have 4 random words, so they are seemingly unrelated. So in this case, if you have such kind of password, actually the entropy is higher than such a strong password. Okay, so basically you can measure. So depending on how many possible English words you can have. For example, I think in a dictionary, so the common English word, maybe we have, I think in a normal English dictionary, we may have 20,000 or 30,000, around 20 to 30,000 English words. So if you randomly choose those 4 words, then you can have actually a higher entropy than choosing such a password like this. Right, so in this case, so actually this provides actually some hint to generate a strong password. Okay, so we look at some general definition and then some problems related to password. Then the next part we will look at some protecting mechanisms. So, but before doing that, maybe we have a break. We have a 10 minutes break. Then we will look at the protecting mechanism. So maybe I give a concrete example, then you know how this entropy actually is calculated. Right, so suppose now we pick a password. So the password will be picked. Suppose we know that the password will be picked using this particular format. So this is like a 5-character password. So the first password is chosen from the alphabet of all the uppercase letters, English letters. So the second word is chosen from the lowercase letters, all the possible lowercase letters. The third one is a digit. The fourth one is chosen from this set of special characters. And the last one is fixed, is this hex key. Okay, so suppose this is basically, say, the format of the password. So now, based on this format, we can actually determine the entropy, right? So to determine the entropy, basically, first we can calculate n. N is the total number of possible passwords, right? So how many possible possibilities for the password? So basically, for the first position, how many possibilities? For all the uppercase letters, how many possibilities? 26. Second one, lowercase letters, also 26. Third one, digits, 10. The fourth one, you have 4, you choose from these 4. How many possibilities? 4. So the last one, you fix it, so you only have one choice. So how many possible passwords in total? Here you add them or multiply them. Multiply. So don't make mistake. Many students actually make mistake. They add them together, add these numbers. But you need to multiply these numbers because each position actually, because each position you have so many possibilities. So if you want to count the total, you need to multiply them. So in this case, so this is n. So basically now log n will be the entropy. So log n actually is equal to a log 2 base 2, 26 times 26 times 10 times 4 times 1. So actually this is equivalent to a log base 2, 26 plus log base 2, 26 plus log base 2, 10 plus log base 2, 4 and then plus log base 2, 1. Right? So because logarithm, if you have multiply, you can now add them together. Basically, the entropy of the whole password is the sum of the entropy of each individual character. Right? So you can add the entropy of each individual characters, then you get the sum is actually the entropy of the whole password. So in this case, log base 2 to 26, this is roughly I think 4 point something, right? Because 2 to the power 4 is 16, 2 to the power 5 is 32, so this is 4 point something, this is 4 point something, this is about 3, this is 2, and in particular, this one is 0. The last one does not carry any entropy, because log base 2, 1 is 0. So the last one, because it's fixed, it does not carry any entropy. Right? So because entropy is associated with uncertainty. If there is no uncertainty, then it does not carry entropy. Right? So this is basically an example to illustrate how to calculate entropy. You can either calculate the total possible passwords and then you do log base 2, or actually you can calculate one by one and then you add them together. And basically that's the way you can calculate the entropy of a password. Right, so this is one example to illustrate. Suppose, of course, this is based on the assumption that you know actually how this password is generated. Right? Okay, so any question? So for this part, you know how to calculate the entropy, right? So you calculate the total number of possibility and then you do log base 2. Okay, so that's for example for this password entropy. So now we will continue. So we will look at the protecting mechanism. So basically the protecting mechanism, so we can have, for different attacks, we can have different mechanism. For password guessing, as I said, you can just count the number of incorrect login, fail login, then you can block the account if you have this threshold. You exceed the number of threshold, the threshold set for the number of fail login. And then another way is to slowly process password. So this actually is done by some password systems. For example, so this is called password stretching. So if you search on the internet, this is called password stretching. So essentially, instead of immediately tell the answer, we will slowly process this verification process. And one particular way used, one particular mechanism used is the so-called hash. So if you use MD5 or SHA-1, actually it's not good to store the transform password using MD5 or SHA-1. But if you use another hash function called bhash, actually this it applies this method. So it basically will process the password slowly, so that for the attacker it will take a longer time to do the password testing. So for the individual user, actually it will not have a significant delay. For example, you just every time you log in, the server gives like maybe half-second delay. For individual user, because you just not log into the server normally, you won't detect such a difference. But for the attacker, actually, because the attacker needs to enumerate all the possible passwords, and then each time it will have a half-second delay. You accumulate the delay together, that will significantly delay the overall time for the attacker to find the password, because the attacker needs to enumerate all the possibilities. So later, actually, when we look at this hash of password. So I will probably give more information about this part. So if you use MD5 or SHA-1, actually that's not good because there is no such possibility to delay. But if you use something called Bhash, actually it can cause, the user can adjust the amount of delay for processing a password. So that's, in general, that's called password stretching. Right, so these are mechanisms to prevent some particular attacks. Then another mechanism we can improve the security is to improve the quality. For example, by increasing the entropy of the password. Right, so in the previous slide, the cartoon actually demonstrates. So if you have some good mechanism, actually you can have a high entropy. High entropy means you have more possibilities for the password. We cannot control the attackers like the testing speed because it's controlled by the attacker. If the attacker is rich, he could buy a lot of GPUs, then he could have very fast processing time. So we could not control the testing time of the attacker, but we can improve the quality. That means we enlarge the number of possible passwords, we increase the entropy. Right, so if we use the example in the previous cartoon, actually we should know that actually sometimes we can use so-called passphrase. So passphrase actually is an alternative compared with a normal single password. So passphrase can be like a combination of a few words, and then now basically you enlarge the number of possibilities by using multiple words. And then sometimes you can also do some modification, because if you simply use passphrase, so maybe if the attacker actually, if you use some common words, then there is still the number of possibility may still be small. But you can do some tricks. You can use some tricks to enlarge the entropy. For example, actually you can insert some characters. For example, you can replace the letter O by 0. Maybe you can replace the letter L by 1, the lowercase l by 1. So you can replace B by 8. So basically now it is possible that for the particular character, it is the original character or it can be a replaced character. So in this case, so if you have, say, each position now you have 2 more possibilities, then actually you have 2 possibilities instead of 1, then actually you can increase the entropy. So this is some other mechanism we can use to use in conjunction with the passphrase to increase the entropy. Right, so of course, if we use a passphrase, we still can have something similar as a dictionary attack or a hybrid attack. So basically, in this case, the attacker, instead of enumerating all the possible passwords, then the attacker may try to enumerate all the possible passphrases. Right, so if we do some trick to replace the letters with numbers, then the attacker may also do this kind of replacement in order to test all the possible passphrases. Okay, so these are the rules usually used by the password systems. For example, you need to have numerical letters and numerical characters, and also then the uppercase letters, lowercase letters, special characters, and so on. You need to change password every 3 months and so on. Alright, so you cannot reuse any of the previous 5 passwords and so on. So all these kind of rules now are common for different type of systems. Then suppose we have such kind of rules. So how to generate a high quality password that can satisfy the rule, but at the same time can have a high entropy. So that's basically what we need to consider, right? So if you don't satisfy the rules, if you simply choose although we can use passphrase to have high entropy password, but if you don't satisfy the rule, basically the system will reject the password. So then how to create a password that can satisfy the rules on the other hand, you can still have the high entropy, then we can actually use some modified version of the passphrase. For example, so you may pick similar to the previous like passphrase example. You can choose a passphrase, but this passphrase should be difficult to predict. So if you remember in the cartoon, actually we assume each word is randomly chosen. However, in reality, unless you can have some picture in your mind to link this passphrase with to link this passphrase with the picture. Otherwise, it is difficult to memorize. But in general, actually, you can use some other way. So that allow you to link like the words, and then you can still produce high entropy password. So one example is you can choose a sentence. For example, this is a sentence chosen by you, right? And then actually you can just, of course, so if you use this one, it may be too long, but you can choose, for example, the first character of each word, and then you put them together, right? So, and in addition, actually you can also do some change. For example, you can replace this L by 1, you can replace this B by 8, so you can also do some changes here. So in this case, actually you can produce a password which actually is derived from a passphrase. And then you have basically a strong password which can satisfy the rules, and also at the same time it will have a relatively high entropy. Right, so here if you don't have any digit here, for example, if you don't have any digit here, so you may replace some of the characters 2 digits. But you should avoid choosing some sentence like this, because if we have some common like sayings from famous people, if you choose them, then basically this is not like as good as a random sentence in the second example. So if you choose the second one, it's more robust against the like diction attack. So the passphrase diction attack. For this one, it's more vulnerable to the passphrase diction attack. Right. So another important like remark about the password is we need to distinguish the online and offline guessing, the enumeration. For the online enumeration, as I mentioned, we can actually prevent this kind of attack by just restricting the number of failed logins. But for the offline guessing attack, this is more dangerous. So the offline happens when the attacker obtains something related to your password. So this can happen, for example, when the attacker obtains your like a transformed password. Say the attacker has hacked into the system and obtained the so-called password table. So in this case, the attacker does not directly obtain a password, but a converted password. However, this converted password now becomes a basis to compare against. The attacker can do the guessing attack, like the brute force or diction attack, and then basically for each possible password, it can do the transformation and compare with this transformed password. Then, if the attacker identifies a correct match between the two transformed password, then attacker can identify the correct password. So this kind of attack can happen when the attacker obtains the password table, or when you actually do the remote logging. If you do remote logging, for example, in the 368, probably if you study 368, you know the NTLM. We use a hash of the password. We use a hash of password to do logging. But the hash of password is similar as the password table. We use a transformed password. But if the attacker can obtain this information, then the attacker can compare this hash password against the hash of all the possible passwords in the table, in the password table, and then see which one gives the correct match. So in this case, we can do the offline guessing attack. The offline is more dangerous because the user or the server, they are unaware of the attack. Attacker basically obtains some information and then perform this attack offline. You can do the attacker can perform this password guessing attack without the awareness of the user or the server. So this is more dangerous compared with online. Right, so the online and offline, actually the difference is not whether there is internet connection or not. So This actually I test this question several times. Every time I ask what's the difference between online and offline. So many students will answer online will require connection, internet connection, but offline does not require internet connection. But that's not the key point. The key point is whether the testing is limited or not. For online, that means you are testing against a live system. So the number of testing is limited because if you try several times, you fail several times, then the system will basically lock the account. Offline, you don't have such kind of limitation. So the difference is whether the number of trials performed by the attacker is limited or not. It's not really about whether there is internet connection or not. Okay, so that's the difference between online and offline attack. So if I test this question again, so don't make the same mistake again. So the difference is whether there is restriction on the number of trials that can be attempted by the attacker. Right. So for the attacker, of course, so even if you choose a large high entropy password, then attacker, if they have the sufficient resource, actually they can still perform the password testing fairly quickly, because nowadays we have a lot of tools, so that can be utilized by the attacker. For example, GPU actually is one particular tool used by the attacker to do the password testing, because you can test password in parallel, right? So there is no a link between different passwords, so you can just test them in parallel. Right, so now in the previous part, we looked at some general information about the password, then and also some general text. So next part, we will look at how password is stored in the operating system. So we will look at the Unix system as a typical example, and then we will look at the hashing and sorting. So these are the two mechanisms used by Unix. So hash basically is the hashing is done by using a so-called cryptographic hash function. Like I said, we can use MD5, SHA-1, and so on. So, however, if you want to have better security, so you should use something called something similar as a Dhash, because that actually allows the user to adjust the response time. So this basically can delay the attacker by slowly processing the verification of the password. Okay, so what is hashing? Hashing is basically it's different from the hashing you studied in Blue Street data structure. So this hashing is for security purpose. So we use a so-called cryptographic hash function. So this can produce what we call a message digest, or a thumbprint of the message. So basically the hashing can be done for arbitrary size message, but the output has a fixed size. So no matter how long the input message is, this hashing will produce a fixed size output, fixed length output. Right, so if you have 1 bit input, the size of output is fixed. For example, MD5, it will be 128 bit, that's a 16 byte. SHA-1 will have 20 bytes, 160 bit. So if you have 1 bit input, hash output will have for MD5, 16 byte. If you have 1 gigabyte input, the hash output is still 16 byte. So that's basically the general definition of hash. Basically, it will transform data from arbitrary length input to a fixed length output. Right? So we call the output a message digest, or you can say this is a thumbprint of the message. Right? So so there are some requirements. First, hash must be efficiently computed. So so this is about the functionality, not the security. So we must quickly produce output from the input. Right, so this, as I said, this output is referred to as a hash value or message digest. Right, so if we look at some simple hash mechanisms, actually they can satisfy this the efficiency or the functionality requirement, but they are not secure hash functions in terms of security. So one example, for example, you can simply do a modular operation. For example, if you have X, so you can transform any binary string. So you can transform any data into binary string. You can convert binary string into an integer. Then one simple way to do the hash is you can mold numbers, and then you have you use the remainder as the hash value. So another way, you can just take a fixed size, a fixed part of the input. For example, you can take the least 16 bytes, or the least significant 16 bytes, or the most significant 16 bytes as the hash value. So if you don't have sufficient input, maybe you can just do some random padding, or you can pad a lot of zeros. So in this case, we can still produce fixed size output for arbitrary size input, and then efficiency is still high, but these hash functions are not good for security purposes because they don't satisfy the so-called one-wayness and the collision resistance. So for the hash function, we require high efficiency in computation, but more importantly, we want to have some security properties. So the two security properties, actually there are more than two. You will study the detail in 361, and in this subject, we mainly look at the two important properties. One is called one-wayness or pre-image resistance. One-wayness, that means the calculation of the hash value is one way. Given the input, you can efficiently calculate output. But given the output, you cannot find the input or the pre-image. So that's the one-way or pre-image resistance. That means you can only do the calculation in one direction, but not the other direction. The other one is collision resistant. That means it's computationally infeasible to find two messages which will produce the same hash output. So collision will definitely exist. So we don't use the term impossible. Collision definitely will exist because imagine, so you have a hash function with a fixed size output. That means the number of possible output is fixed, but it can take arbitrary size input. That means the number of input actually is infinity, right? So you have infinite many input, you have fixed number of output. So collision will definitely exist. This is simply the pigeonhole principle, right? So you have a list of pigeonholes, you put the letters, but if you have more letters than the pigeonholes, then definitely you will have two letters, at least two letters in one pigeonhole. So in this case, you have collision. So if the size of the input space is larger than the size of output space, you definitely will have a collision. But we want to make sure it's difficult, very difficult to find collision, although they exist. So that's the collision resistance. So it's computationally infeasible, not impossible. Infeasible to find, very difficult to find two different messages which produce the same hash output. So actually nowadays, like SHA-1, MD5, they are no longer collision resistant because MD5 was broken a long time ago, and the SHA-1 I think broken recently by if you actually Google produced some collision for the SHA-1, and nowadays we use SHA-256 or SHA-3. SHA-3 is the new standard. SHA-256 is still widely used in, for example, in blockchain. In Bitcoin we use SHA-256. So that's SHA-2. Usually we call it SHA-2. It's the same as SHA-1, but the size of output is longer. So instead of 160 bit, we have 256 bit. So this picture illustrates the two properties. So first is one-wayness. One-wayness means given the input is easy to compute the output. However, given the output, hash output is difficult to find the input. However, the input may not be unique. So we require that given the output, it's difficult to find any valid input. Because we know for output here, there can exist multiple inputs, but it's difficult to find any of them, any input that can produce this hash. So given a hash value, it's difficult to find any pre-image, not necessarily the one you use to produce the hash. And the collision resistance means it's difficult to find two different ones, which actually will hash to the same hash value. So these are the two requirements. Alright, so if you look at password, if you study these two properties with password, you can easily identify why we need these properties. One-wayness, that means if we hash a password, we store the hash value instead of main password, then it will ensure even the attacker can obtain the password table, like the hash output of the password. The attacker cannot directly get the password because you only get the transformed password, right? So this is better than storing the simple plain password, because if you store the plain password, attacker breaks into the system, and then obtain the password table, then attacker directly gets the password. In this case, if we store the hash of the password, but not the original password, then even the attacker obtains a hash value, attacker cannot get the original password because it's difficult to find the pre-image, which is the original password. So what the attacker can do is you create a dictionary, you hash them one by one, and you check which one gives the correct hash value. If you get the correct hash value, that means you locate the correct password. You cannot directly get the password from hash. What you can do is to do the brute force, to check, to hash each possible password and check one by one. So that's related to the one-way list, right? So one-way list means even attacker obtains the password table. Attacker does not know your password because it only stores the hash of the password, and you cannot invert the function to find the password. So that's why one-way list is related to security. Collision resistance is related to another important requirement for password system. What is the requirement? So we want to have a low false positive rate, because if you have collision resistance, that means if you have two passwords, you won't have the same hash value. That means you cannot use the second password to log into the system because you don't have the collision. But if you don't have collision resistance, that means you can easily find two passwords which have the same hash value. Then you can have a false positive. Right? So now basically we store the hash of the password instead of the plain password. So when the user enters a password, the system will hash the user input and compare against the hash value. So we only now store the hash value, right? So not the plain password. So once basically the user, there is a matching between the hash value, the stored hash value, and the hash of the user input. If they match, that means the user has the correct password. If they don't match, that means the user will be rejected. So in this case, the collision resistance will ensure that we don't have the two passwords. We can't find two passwords. Difficult to find two passwords which will have the same hash result, hash value. In this case, we can reduce the false positive rate because you can't have two passwords which will have the same hash value. You can't use the second password, different password, to log in because of the same hash value. So these two properties actually can be related to the requirements of security requirements of the password-based system. So one is about the secrecy of password. You cannot directly reverse the hash to get the password, even the attacker obtained this password table. The second one is to ensure you cannot use the wrong password to log in because you cannot produce collision. So that's the reason we need these two requirements. And the common hash algorithm include like the MD5 SHA-1. So these are the common hash functions. Right. So now back to the password file. So as I said, now we we store the hash of the password instead of the plain password, right? And the collision resistance will ensure we have low false positive rate. That means you can't find a different password which produces the same hash value because the hash is a collision resistant. So this will eliminate the possibility of false positive. On the other hand, even if the attacker has obtained a password table, then attacker cannot obtain a password because hash is one way, right? So what the attacker can do is to do the brute force. Because hash is public function, so the attacker can do is you just create a dictionary and you hash them one by one and check which one gives the correct hash value. If you find the one that gives the correct hash value, you find the password, right? So that's the only way. So basically, the one-way list will ensure that the only way the attacker can do is like a enumeration or brute force. You cannot find another way to invert the hash function. Alright, so in Unix, instead of only using hash, actually we use another technique which is called sorting. But in Windows, actually we only use a hash, we don't use sorting. So what is sorting? Sorting is instead of a hash or password, we hash password with a sort value. The sort value is a random value chosen by the system. So the user basically will have a user ID and then the hash of password. So now we don't store the plain password, we store the hash of password. And instead of storing only the hash of password, we store the hash of the password and the sort. Right, so each user will have a different sort value. Right, so you may ask, then what is the purpose of adding this sort? So the sort value is actually stored together with a password table. That means if the attacker can obtain so now basically if a normal user logs in, then the user type in a user password, right? So you type in your user ID and password, and then the system will check, the Unix system will check in the password table to find your user ID. And then it will find the corresponding sort value. Then it will take the input, what you have input as a password, concatenate with the sort value. So this is concatenation. Then you hash these two, and then you compare whether the hash value is the same as the stored hash value. If they are the same, then the user will successfully log in. If they are different, then the user will be rejected. So this is how the Unix system perform user authentication using the hashing and the sorting. So we hash password together with the sort value. So the reason of introducing this sort value actually is to, again, slow down the brute force attack. Suppose the attacker obtained this hash table, right? If we don't have this sort value, we only hash the plain password. Then when the attacker try one password from the dictionary, say the attacker build a dictionary. If the attacker try one password, attacker hash the password, then the attacker can check against all the users. Because you only have the hash of password, you don't have this part. All the users only store the hash of password. Suppose we don't use sorting. Then the attacker try one password, hash it, it can compare against a list of users. But if you have sorting, then every time if you pick a password, you cannot just use one hash to compare against all the users. You need to do hash one by one because each user has a different sort value. You pick a potential password, you need to concatenate with this sort value to check Alice's password. You need to concatenate with a different value to check against Bob's password, and so on. So if there are n users, you pick one password, you need to hash n times with different sort values to test one by one. But if you don't have the sort value, you pick one hash value, password, you hash it, you can check against all the users. Anyone matching this, anyone with a hash value matching what you tested will basically be compromised. Because now you can use one hash value, you do one hash to check against all the users. And the second advantage, so that's the first advantage. We can slow down the attacker by using one hash value to check against all the users. The second advantage is now if you have the same password stored by the different users, chosen by different users, you will have different hash values. If you don't have the sort, if the Alice and Bob choose the same password, they will have the same hash value. So if you compromise one of them, you compromise both. So you know, because you know from the hash value that they are the same password, right? So, but now if you use sorting, you don't have this problem. If Alice and Bob choose the same password, the hash will still be different. From the hash table, you cannot tell whether any two people they choose the same password or not, because each one will have a unique sort value attached with the password to do this hashing. So that's the advantage of using sorting. So the using sort can slow down basically the attack. So in particular, the attacker cannot use one hash value to check against the whole group of users. And also the attacker cannot easily tell whether the two users use the same password or not by simply looking at the hash table. So this actually is a reason of using sorting. Okay, so anyway, so basically, as I mentioned, so if we use collision-resistant hash function, then the false positive is less likely. Although it's not possible, not impossible, but it's very less likely because we have a collision resistant. Okay. Right. So basically, the Unix system uses a function called crypt to do the hash. And in Unix, there are two crypt functions. So you don't confuse these two functions. So one is the utility function to do the real encryption. So one, if you run the crypt in the Unix terminal, actually you are doing encryption. There is another crypt function, which is the hash function. So don't mix these two. All right. So one is for encryption, one is for the hashing. So we are interested in the second one. The second one is for hashing. All right. So basically, if you use like a Unix, the old version of Unix, actually it will produce a hash output which contains 13 characters. So the 13 character actually also includes the sort. The sort actually is in the beginning of the 13 characters, and then you have the hash value. All right. So no matter how long the password is, so basically the hash value, the hash produced by this script, will have 13 characters, right? And if you use the same password for different users, then you still get different hash values because of the sorting. Because every time when we hash password, we can calculate a sort value for a new sort value for users, for new users. So in this case, even if you use the same password, you will get different hash values, right? So there is some code provided in the sample code, so you can actually run those code to have some experience. So you can run the sample code in the Unix. For example, you can connect to Banshee and run the sample code, right? So this is one simple example to illustrate how this sorting works. So this is a Perl script. So by the way, in the lecture notes, sometimes you will see some Perl script. But I will explain the purpose of those Perl script programs. You don't need to worry about the details because this is not required in your assignment or in your exam. So I will just use Perl script as examples to explain some ideas. So here we can use a Perl script to do this sorting and hashing and sorting. For example, so in this case, actually we can create an array of sorts. This is an array of random sorts. Hash a password, right? So you ask the user to give a hash password. This is from standard input. Then you run this script. This is the Unix hash function. So it will hash the password concurrently with two random strings chosen from this sort array. So you choose one random item from this array, and you concatenate. This dot is concatenation. You concatenate with another random item chosen from this array. Then you hash the password with these two randomly chosen elements from the array. So in this case, this is a simple program to illustrate how this hashing and sorting can be achieved. So if you run this Perl script, so you can get different hash values even if you have the same user password because the sort values are different, right? So this is even in the sample code. So if you are interested, you can run this code. So in the Unix, actually, if you install Perl in your Windows machine, you can also run the Perl, right? So you can install the active Perl and then you can run it. So this is to illustrate to how this hashing and sorting can be done. And then for the newer version of Unix and Linux, actually we can employ other hash functions like the MD5 or SHA-1. Actually, they will provide stronger hashing than the crypt. And then you may ask, where is the hash user password table stored? Actually, depending on the version of Unix. So in the old version, it's stored in the so-called password file. So this is a password file. That means it stores the password table. So if you go to this like a directory, and then you can find this password file, and everyone can read the password file, but only the root user can modify the password file. That means only the root user can add new users or delete users, but all the users, other users, they can read the password file. So the password file includes the username, the hash of the user password. Actually, this is a sorted version of the hash, and then some other information, right? For example, the default shell that will be executed when the user connect to the system. Right, so here are some explanations about the items. So we will study some of them again in access control. For example, the user ID, group ID, and so on, because these will be related to access control. But for now, we will just look at the username password. Right, so later we will look at some other items when we look at access control. And then now in the newer version of Windows, Unix, and Linux, actually now basically the password is no longer stored in the password file. We store it in a separate file, which is called the shadow file. So the password file now in the newer version of Unix and Linux, we no longer store the hash password. Although we don't change the name, but it no longer contains the hash password. The hash password now is in the so-called shadow file, and now the shadow file can only be accessed by root user, like an administrator in Windows. Even the reading permission is denied. So for other users, no user can read or access the shadow except the root user. But the password file still can be read by all the users, but can only be modified by the root user. Right. So this will introduce additional level of security, because now basically only the root user can see the hash of the password. Other users, they cannot see the hash of the password, because if there is some malicious insider, they can log into the system. If they can see the hash of the password of all users, then they can do the brute force attack to break all the user password. But now, since only the shadow file contains hash of password, and only the root user can access the shadow file, then this prevents the normal users from obtaining the hash value of the password. So even the hash value is hidden from the normal users, so you cannot do the brute force or dictionary attack in this case. Right, so now basically in the newer version, you can have a password file, but password file no longer contains a hash password. The hash password is in the shadow file, or in the shadow file. Okay, so basically this is an additional level of security provided by the shadow file. However, so depending on the configuration of the system, so sometimes if the system is configured wrongly, the shadow file may still be exposed to attackers. So one example here is in this Solaris system. So this is a very old vulnerability. So actually, even the user tried to log into the local host and then type in a wrong password. But actually, in this case, basically the user will be denied because the password is wrong, right? However, actually the system dumps the code with the shadow file. So in this case, actually, you can identify all the hash password, the hash value of the password from the code dumped by the system. So this is a configuration problem of the system. And in this case, actually, we use a utility function called strings. This is a very useful function. So we will see this function in the subsequent topics. So the string basically can display all the printable characters in a file, no matter this is a object file or a normal file. So even if you have a binary code, you have an exe file, the strings, this utility function can still display all the printable strings in the object file. For example, if in your program, so you can look at a simple example. So suppose you have a program like this. You compile this to an exe file or a binary file. So in this case, basically, if you use the strings against the exe or the binary file, you can still see all the strings you hard-coded in the program. If you compile this one in Windows to exe, you use the strings against the exe, you can still find all these strings hard-coded in the program. So essentially, this tells us you should never hard-code your password, because if you hard-code your password, even say you compile the program to an executable file, by using some utility function like this, you can still locate the password within the exe file. So this is a simple example to illustrate hard-coding the password is not a good idea. You can use some very basic utility function to locate this string, including the password. Right, so this is basically the warning for you to when you do the programming. And then sometimes, so you may ask, if I don't hard-code the password, how about I hard-code the hash value of the password? So in this case, the string utility may not be able to locate this password. However, so if the attacker knows where actually you store the hash value, the attacker may replace the hash value by a different one. So this can be done by using some other tool, for example, the hex editor. So if you use a hex editor, you can basically see the memory of some program actually are running. Even if the program is running, you can see the content of the memory for this program. Then you can replace the hash value by a different one. Say you just hash a random password, you replace the original one with this new random hash. Then you can use the new password you used to create the random hash to log in. So this kind of attack is also possible. So for example, if you use some hex editor to edit some running program. So in this case, you still can break into the system even if you store the hash of the password. Right, so this actually shows you should never store the secret in a program. Right, so it's dangerous to store secret either in plain text format or transform format. It's always dangerous to put the secret. Of course, if we indeed need to do that, we can use some technique. For example, the obfuscation. So probably I will briefly introduce obfuscation later. So how to, for example, if we indeed have secret, how to hide the secret in a program? We can use the obfuscation to do that. All right. So probably I won't be able to cover this part due to the time constraint. So the rainbow table, basically, this is what you will need to do in assignment 1. And this is one practical way to hack the user password. So we will continue the topic of password authentication. Then I will also introduce assignment 1, the programming component. And today we will look at first finish the password authentication. We still have 2 components left. One is a rainbow table related to your assignment 1. And another one is one-time password. But that's not the one-time password you use in like e-banking and so on. But we will look at how the real one-time password system is implemented in like different domains. Okay, so in the previous lecture, we looked at some basic concept about authentication. So we looked at like different factors or bases that can be used for authentication. And then we also looked at some errors that can occur, like false positive and false negative. Okay. Then we look at the problems associated with the password authentication. So there can be different types of attacks, right? So because we usually need to type in the password, so it can be captured by keylogger. So someone may also like watch over the shoulder to observe your password and so on. So however, so the main problem of password is the low entropy, because we have quite a limited number of possibilities for the password available. So the attacker can use like diction attack, brute force attack, and so on to hack the system. And then we looked at also
So in order to prevent the data breach, for example, if someone hacks into a system, if you store the password in plain text, then the hacker can basically obtain all the password. So in order to prevent such kind of data breach or security breach on the server side, we use the hashing algorithm to store the password. Right? So we don't store the plain password. We put the password into a hash function, and then we store the hash value. So the hash is one way, so that after obtaining the hash value, the attacker cannot immediately obtain the password. The attacker basically need to do the brute force to try one by one until you can produce the correct hash. So this will basically reduce the convenience of the attacker. So eventually, the attacker may still be able to find the password if they can find the password table, because they can do the brute force to do the matching one by one, right? So, but this will basically slow down the process. And then to further slow down the process, we use the hashing and sorting, right? We, instead of just hashing the password, we hash the password with the sort value. Sort value is unique for each user. Then in this case, you cannot simply hash one password and check against different users, because each one will need to use a different sort value to hash together with the password. Right, so that's what we studied in the previous class. This is the hashing and sorting. Right, so we also looked at how password is stored in the Unix and so on. So if you want to have a look at the password file, or at least the size of the shadow file, actually you can go to the Banshee. In the lab exercise, actually we have some practical exercise that allow you to find out, for example, what are the users in the Banshee, and but you cannot see the hash of the password, because this is only readable by the root user in the shadow file. Anyway, so later I may post some instructions, for example, how you can connect to Banshee. So previously, I know many students here, they don't connect to Banshee, but actually in the Banshee we install a lot of interesting functions you can actually play with. Anyway, so in the lab exercise, a lot of them are associated with utilities available in Banshee. But later I will provide some links and some login information, so you can basically use your student ID and not student ID, your email account, and then the password to log into Banshee using secure shell SSH. Okay, so we will continue the topic. So we first look at the rainbow table. So rainbow table is to basically if we put the hash the password in the transform form, then basically the attacker need to do this brute force one by one. So you build a dictionary, and then after you get the hash of the password, so probably also the sorted version of the password, then you may try to do a brute force. So basically, you try one password in the dictionary, you hash it, compare against the value in the table. If they are the same, that means you get the correct password. If the guessing is wrong, you go to the next one. So that's how the brute force works. And then, actually, this process may take a long time, because if you have a large password space, then to enumerate all the passwords, you may take a few weeks or a few months, right, by using a normal computer. So, however, so the attacker now basically they try to speed up this process. So how to speed up this process? So they can do the pre-computation. That means they build a dictionary, and then so in the dictionary it contains all the password, and then you also hash each password. So you pre-compute such a table. So we call this table a rainbow table. So it contains the hash value of different passwords from the dictionary. So now, once the attacker obtains the hash value, the target, from the compromised server, the password table, then the attacker now basically can do a very quick search. So you don't need to do the hash in real time, you just need to do a search. Say you obtain a hash value from the compromised server, then you search the table, and if you can find the hash value in the table, then corresponding password is the correct password. So you don't need to build the hash table in real time. You can do the pre-computation. So that's basically the idea of remote table is very simple idea. So you just pre-compute the hash value for different password. Once you get the target hash value, you search. If you can find the target hash value in the table, in the remote table, that means you locate the correct password. If you cannot find it, then basically you may need to enlarge, you may need to build a new remote table for a different password space. So that's how remote table works. However, so the disadvantage of this approach is the size of the table can be very large. So depending on how many possible passwords available. And also if you use hashing and sorting, then the size will be even bigger. Right? So, and in this case, actually sorting can somehow prevent this remote table attack because the attacker may not know the sort value of a user before compromising the server. So only when the attacker can compromise the server and then obtain a sort value, then the attacker knows what should be the sort value to be hashed with the password. However, so if you still want to do the pre-computation, you need to enumerate all the possible passwords together with all the possible sort values. So the size of the remote table will be huge in this case. So to reduce the size of the remote table, then actually we can have a more advanced remote table. So this is based on the hashing and hash and reduce. So basically we can now store multiple passwords in one record. So in the original remote table, you have one password, one hash, password one, hash one, password two, hash two, and so on. So the number of entries in the table will be linear to the number of possible passwords. So if we just ignore the sort. So in the assignment one, you don't need to worry about sort. We just do the simple version. We ignore the sort value. So if you have a list of passwords, n password, you need to build a remote table with n records. And if n is large, then the remote table is huge. So in order to reduce the size, so now the searching is quite fast because searching can be done in logarithmic complexity, right? Because you can do binary search and you can sort the remote table and binary search, then the sorting is the searching is very fast. But however, the storage cost is huge. So basically, we need to store all the hash values. So basically, to reduce the size of the remote table, we can use the so-called hash reduce. So now, instead of storing one password in one record, we store multiple passwords in one record. So that means in one table, we store multiple passwords. So how to do this? Essentially, we start with password one. We hash it, we get the hash value 1. Then we reduce this hash to another password in the system, right? So in the dictionary. So the reduce can be done based on different methods. So in assignment 1, I will tell you how to do the reduce, but you can still implement this function in different ways. But in general, I will tell you how to reduce the hash value to another password. And then you get, for example, password 2. After that, you do the hash again, you get hash 2. And then you do reduce again, you get hash password 3, and so on. You can continue this process for a few times, and then you stop. So say you do the hash reduce for 4 or 5 times. Then you basically, now you have a chain, right? You have a chain. So now for this chain, you only store the head and the tail. You don't store the intermediate values. The reason is all the intermediate values actually can be generated starting from the beginning, starting from the head. Right, so that's how hash and reduce works. So maybe I can show. I can show the example here. Okay, so this is basically how this hash reduce works. So you start from password 1, and then you hash it, you get hash 1. Then you reduce it, you get password 2, right? So the reduce is basically to map a hash value to a password, to a different password in the password table. And then you can do hash reduce for a few rounds. Then finally, in this case, we do hash reduce like 2 times. We do hash 3 times and reduce 2 times. So eventually, you have the first chain, you have hash 3. So basically now, in the first chain, actually you already captured 3 passwords. Password 1, password 2, password 3. Right, so now you can pick another like a password not captured in the first chain. Say you start from password 4, and then you hash, reduce, and so on. But pay attention here, sometimes you may have so-called collision. So the collision may occur, for example, when you, so the collision of course can also occur when you do the hash, but in general this is very less likely because the password space is small, so it's very less likely if you use the collision resistant hash, you will produce the same hash value. But the collision may occur when you do the reduce. Because hash value has a, like the hash value is very big. It's like, for example, if you use MD5, it's 1 to 8 bits, but the password actually is relatively shorter. So in this case, when you do reduce, you may sometimes have a collision. Say, actually password 2 here appears again, right? So password 2 appears again, and you hash get hash H2. So in this case, actually password 2 is captured in both chains, right? So this is just a simple example to illustrate so how to build a chain in this hash reduce rainbow table. And then after, basically now you have captured 5 passwords, not 6, because password will actually appear in 2 chains. So you capture 5 passwords. So then next chain you start with a new password not captured yet. So basically you need to look at the password table. So if a password is captured, you tick it. If another one is captured, you tick it. So to start with a new chain, you start with a password not captured yet, right? So you continue this process until all the passwords in this dictionary are captured. So in this case, that means you have like a set of lists, right? So they capture all the passwords. But the key point here is you don't store the whole chain. You only store the head and the tail. So for the first chain, you only store password 1 and hash 3. You don't store the intermediate values. Second chain, you also only store password 4 and hash 2. You don't store the intermediate password or hash values. So in this case, essentially, so in the rainbow table, because we don't store the intermediate values, the size actually will be significantly reduced. Because now we have if we have n password, then maybe you have only like half of the entries in the rainbow table, and each entry you have the head and the tail of each chain, right? So in this case, basically we reduce the size of the rainbow table. Then you may ask, how do we do the search? Because we only store the head and the tail, some intermediate passwords and hash values are not stored. How do we do the search? So the searching actually still can be done because each chain can be regenerated from the head from the beginning, right? So if you start from the beginning, you hash reduce, you can reproduce the whole chain. So to search hash password, for example, if now say I want to search password 2. So suppose now I compromise the server and I get a hash value which is hash 2. So actually we can search the tails or the column corresponding to the tails. I can directly find H2 actually is in the second chain. If H2 is in the second chain, then I know, okay, the password must be in front of H2. But I don't store this one. But however, I can reproduce this one from the beginning, right? So because I store password 2 and I know H2 is here, so the password is in front. So I can start from the beginning, from password 4, I can do hash, reduce, and hash. Now I get hash 2. That means, okay, this is the password I need. So this is the first case. The second case, say, now I get hash value H5. So H5 is not in the tail list column. H5 is in the middle. So if I want to search H5, so suppose now I'm given a hash value H5, right? So I want to search this H5, but I can't find it in the list in the tail column. But I know, so actually, if H5 is in the rainbow table, then it's somewhere in the middle of the chain. So what can I do? I can repeat the process. I do the reduce. Then, because reduce here must be a deterministic function. That means when you do reduce for the same hash twice, you get the same password. So if reduce is a deterministic function, that means same input, you get the same reduce output. So if I cannot find H5, I know it's somewhere in the middle of the chain. So I can do the reduce. If I do reduce, I will get what? Password 2, right? Because this will just repeat the process here. And then I do hash, I will get H2. Now I can find H2 appears in the tail column. So if H2 now appears, I know H5 must be somewhere in the middle. So I can again start from beginning. I do hash reduce, hash. Okay, I now find H5. That means this one is the password. So this is how we do the search. So here actually we have a trade-off. The searching is relatively longer than the original rainbow table. Original rainbow table, you just search, you find the hash, you find the password. But now searching is slightly more complex. However, it can save a lot of space. We don't need to store all the passwords and hash values. We only store the head and the tail of each chain. So this is how hash reduce works. So any question? Do you understand how the process works? Yes?
If the hash go back to password 2, this means password 2 is correct, right?
So sorry, can you repeat?
So this means password 2 is the correct password?
No. So in this case, because this is the target, right? This is the target you want to search. So you need to find the pre-image of H5. But you cannot directly find H5 here. So you need to do the reduce hash until you find some item here. So now you need to start from beginning, and what you need to search is the pre-image of H5. So what you need to find is password 5, not password 2. You need to find password 5. So password 5 is the password you want to find for H5.
Then how do we go back to password 2?
How do you?
Then why go back to what do you mean?
The reduction function.
You mean how do you go to this one?
Yeah.
Because the reduction and hash are public, they are known. So you define how basically when you build the rainbow table, you need to determine what is your hash function. The hash function is determined by the system. So you need to determine your own reduction function. So once you determine the reduction function, so you use this function in the construction of the rainbow table. You use the same function when you do the search. Okay? Yeah? So basically, the way you do the reduction here must be the same as the way you do the search here, the reduction here. Because otherwise, if you use different reduction, you cannot repeat this sequence here. So you must use the same reduction in order to repeat the sequence. Okay? Right, so that's basically what you need to implement in assignment 1. Right, so maybe I come back to the first question later. So basically what you need to do is, So what you need to do is, you need to basically build a hash reduced rainbow table based on dictionary, and then you need to do the search for a given hash value. So in the Moodle site, I provided the dictionary, which is a password. So you can find like a file containing like all the password we will use for testing. So however, you need to, basically your program needs to deal with like a different size for the password file. So the password file contains the password extracted from this dictionary. So the words is a dictionary, but the password file can contain just a subset of the words from a password from this word file. So the word file is basically a dictionary, and the password, this is basically a subset. It can be the whole dictionary or it can be a subset. So your program needs to consider like a different size for the password for txt, because we can say we take 1,000 word password from the word dictionary, when we take like 3,000 password from the word dictionary. So your program should be able to handle different size for the password for txt. Alright, so basically you need to write a program either in C, C++, or Java. So that we'll take this one as a input. So this contains a list of password. Then you will produce the rainbow table, the hash reduced rainbow table. That means the rainbow table should only contain the password and also the last hash value of the chain, right? So you don't store the intermediate values, right? So basically you need to do the hash reduce 4 times. So basically for each password, every time to start with a new chain, you pick a password not captured yet, then you do hash reduce 4 times. Actually you do hash 5 times, and then you do the reduce 4 times, right? So after that, basically you capture a set of password, and then next step, you pick a new password, another password in the password.txt, not captured yet. Because if it's already captured in the previous chains, you don't need to capture this password again. You start with a password that is not captured yet. You do hash reduce again, you get a new chain. You repeat this process until all the passwords are captured. All the passwords in the password.txt are captured, then you stop. You have the rainbow table. So that's the first step, you build the rainbow table. And the second step here is to do the search. So the search is similar as what I just explained. You will be given a hash value. So the hash value can be a hash of one of the passwords in the password.txt, or it can be a hash value of another password not included. So basically we will test your program for 2 different cases. So if you are, for example, you are given a hash value, which actually is the hash value of one password in the input file, that means you need to, the expected result is that you can produce the password. So I give you a hash value, you tell me the password. So this is the first case. Second case, if I say I hash a random string, not in the password.txt, and then I ask you to do the search, so the expected value should be no. So you should say, okay, the password cannot be found in the rainbow table, something like that. Right? So you basically, your program needs to correctly identify so whether the password is in the rainbow table or not, and if it's in the rainbow table, then what's the value of the password? So basically, here I also provide the details or the steps. So how to do this hash reduce to build the rainbow table, then how to do the search. So the process is exactly the same as what I just mentioned in using the example. Right, so that's what you need to produce. So for this exercise, so hash will be MD5, and the reduce function actually is the reduction function is actually up to you. So you need to find a way to convert a hash value to a password. So here actually I give one way. So the one solution actually is you can simply reduce the hash value to an index. So you have, say you have 1,000 password. So actually you have the index from 0 to 999, right? So you have a password.txt have 1,000 password. So you have the index from 0 to 999, right? So how to do the reduce? Given a hash value, you can simply convert this hash value to an index. So say the password 1, you pick the password 1, you hash it, you get hash 1. Then you just do a conversion to convert this hash value to one of the numbers between 0 and 99. For example, now you do the reduce. So one simple way is, for example, you can simply do a mode operation. So you have 1,000 password, you mode 1,000, then of course you will get a value between 0 to 99. For example, if you do the mode 1,000, you get, say, 255. In this case, actually the reduced password now becomes password 255 in the list. So this is one way. So, but there are different ways to handle this reduction. But one student mentioned there can be collision. Because if you have different hash values, when you convert to an index, the different hash value will convert to the same index. So for this assignment, you don't need to handle collision. So to simplify your job, you don't need to handle collision. That means, say if just like in the example, say password 2 actually is already captured in the previous chain. So ideally, you should capture a new password instead of another password that has already been captured. And for this assignment, you don't need to worry. You just continue. You can just continue say, okay, password 2, although it's captured, I just continue the process to finish this chain. So that's the collision is not required to be addressed in this assignment. So this basically will simplify your task. Yes.
Is a new chain? Shall we check the previous one?
The new chain. So if you start a new chain, you need to check whether. So you pick a password that is not captured yet. That means when you have a password list, every time you capture a password, you should tick it. You should tick it. You understand what I mean? Ticket means this one is you need to use, for example, you can use an indicator, use like a Boolean value to indicate. Password 1 now is already taken in the remote table. It's already in the remote table. So password 2 is in the remote table. Maybe password 15 is in the remote table. So the next chain, you pick a one password that is not ticked yet. For example, password 3 hasn't been included in any chain before. So I start with password 3 in the second chain. So this is how you. Basically, if you do this process, eventually you will definitely capture all the passwords. Because every time the new chain, you start with a password not captured yet. Do I answer your question? Yeah? All right, so of course, if we don't handle collision, the trade-off is you may have more records than expected. Right? So if you don't have collision, say you have 1,000 password, you do hash reduce like 4 times. That means you can actually capture like 4 passwords. So ideally, you should have 250 records. But if you have collision, that means you may have more than 250. For example, for 1,000 passwords, you may have 500 records instead of 250 records. So, but anyway, so we don't need to worry about collision. It's not required in this assignment. So the drawback is this approach will increase the number of the records. However, it will still be much smaller than the original rainbow table, because the original rainbow table, the size is equivalent to the size of the number of passwords. So this one will, if you don't handle collision, you will still have a smaller rainbow table, but this rainbow table is not as good as the ideal one. So ideal one, if there is no collision, then actually you don't have repeated password. But anyway, so you don't need to worry. Okay, so this is about the programming part. You need to build a cache reduced rainbow table. Any question? Do you understand what is going on here?
For the reduction function, what kind of function is it specified inside?
So reduction, as I said, is up to you. But you basically one way is you give an index for each password, right? So now you basically you try to find a way to convert a hash value to the index to an index for the password, right? So that's what you can do. For example, you can do a mode operation, as I said, or you can just take a few bits. For example, if I have say 1024 password, then you can take like 10 bits. If you have 4096, that's 2 to the power of 2 to the power 12. That means you can take 12 bits of the hash value, then you can convert that 12 bits to a number like between 0 and 4095, right? So depending on the size of the password file, so actually you need to basically find a way to convert the hash to the index, to an integer, which specifies the index of the next password. Yes? Question? Any other question? Yes?
Inside the module there's a words file, right?
Yeah.
Is that the password .txt?
No. So words contains the dictionary. So passwords is contains the passwords taken from that file. So words I think contain like 20,000 or 30,000 passwords. But for your assignment, for example, when we do testing, we may only take like 1,000 passwords from that file, and then we use this 1,000 password to build this password.txt. But all the passwords in the password.txt will be taken from that dictionary, word dictionary. But we may not use the whole dictionary to test.
So we create a new password.txt which is from the word.
Yeah, you can take a subset of the password taken from the word.
So we combine two words. Or?
No. You just take it. For example, you take the first 1,000 password from the words, and then you create this password for txt. So it contains 1,000 password.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Any other question? Yes.
So the passwords in the password objects, right? Is it just a single word, or can it be a combination of multiple words?
So each password is just a single word. Yeah. So actually, you can. I'm not sure if I have these words here. I can maybe. Sorry, I don't have it here. So each password is just a single word. A single word. You don't need to have consider like a passphrase. So this is just a single word for each password. Other question? Okay, so that's for the programming part. And by the way, for the first part, actually, some students asked me after the lecture on Saturday, so probably I should give the same hint. So basically, this specifies the rules to pick a password, right? So you know how to calculate entropy according to the example I gave in the previous lecture. But now this question is actually there is a tricky step, the last step. So the last step says we apply a hash function. So you pick a password according to the rules, and now you hash. The last step is that you hash the pick password, and then you use the hash output as a password. So the question here is actually whether this hash will affect the entropy or not. Whether the hash will increase the entropy or decrease the entropy, or keep the entropy unchanged. So you need to think about this question. Right? So of course the hash actually has more possibilities. But you need to think whether all these possible hash values are in the password space. Right? So whether the password space is the same as the hash, output space. So to give you a simple example, suppose I pick 5 passwords, I hash them. Does the hash, if we use the hash value as the final password, so how many possible outputs are there? Are they 2 to the power 1 to 8, or basically are they only 5 hash values there because you only pick 5 passwords to hash? So you need to think whether the hash actually will affect the entropy, whether it will increase or decrease or keep the entropy unchanged. Alright, so that's some things you need to think about. Right, so that's for question 1. Right, so the question 2, actually I will explain, question 2 and 3 I will explain later. So probably after, maybe question 3 you can do it after today's class. Question 2, depending on progress, you may still need, you may need to work on it after the next lecture. So anyway, the programming part you can start now. Basically, you follow what is written in the specification. Right. So here is basically the process to do the search. Essentially, the same process given in the assignment specification. Right. So that's for rainbow table. So actually, in the internet, actually you can also find some information about this hash reduce, and there are some ways to handle collision. So if you are really interested, you can search on the internet and see how people actually handle the collision to further reduce the size. But for this assignment, you don't need to worry about it. So the next topic remaining for this part is the one-time password. As I said at the beginning, this is different from the one-time password we use in daily life, but we will look at that kind of one-time password later after we finish this one. So this actually is a one-time password system that does not rely on any other device. So in practice, in real applications, so the one-time password we use actually rely on some other factor. For example, you need to use a mobile phone, or you need to use like a token, a hardware token, to generate one-time password. But this one actually was proposed in, I think, in the early 1980s. So in that case, actually, at that time, we didn't have this kind of hardware token available. So now the question basically is, so without any other assistance, can we produce a one-time password system? So the requirement, of course, so the trivial solution is, of course, you can select a group of passwords, and each time you use one of them. But this one is a very naive solution for one-time password, and it's not user-friendly because you need to keep this set of one-time password, right? So on the other hand, we want to make sure the one-time passwords are not correlated. For example, you should not just change your password, say Alice, then you put 1 at the end, Alice 2 at the end. So in this case, again, this is not a good one-time password because if someone captures one of the passwords, they can easily produce the remaining password. So we want to make sure you don't need to memorize a set of one-time password, but on the other hand, you want to make sure these one-time passwords are independent. So actually, this is not a trivial problem to be solved. Right? So actually, to solve this problem, someone produced a very good idea. So this is called the. So here are the problems related to the naive solutions. So I just mentioned. Okay, so this one, the solution actually was produced by the Lamport. I think if either at the end of 1970s or at the beginning of 1980s. So I think the system is older than all of you, right? So the idea is you start actually still with a simple password, but now you use a so-called hash chain. So a hash chain to produce a one-time password. So the idea is like this. So you have you pick an initial password. So that's the normal password. You hash it, then you get a new password. Basically, you use the hash value as the new password, and then you can hash this new password again. You get the next hash value, right? So you can create a chain of hash values, and then all the items in the chain. So here we don't do the reduce, we just do the hash, right? So now this chain contains a chain of one-time password. However, the order is important. Whether you start from the head or you start from the tail is important. So we should not start from head, because if we start from head, if the password is captured, is compromised, all the remaining one-time passwords are compromised. Because from the head, you can reproduce the remaining password. So in Lamport's one-time password, the first password actually starts from the end of the chain. So to give you some idea, so you have an initial password, and then you hash it, say, n times. In this case, you have n one-time password, but the first password you use is from the tail, not from the head of the chain. Okay, so basically, now the first time you want to log in, so essentially, the user will keep the initial password, the first password chosen, but the server will keep the last, like a hash password. So the server keeps the last hash value on its a password table, but the user keeps the first password. Right. So now, in order to log in for the first time, basically the server will tell the user, okay, basically the server needs to maintain a counter. What is the position in the hash chain? So at the beginning, because the server keeps the last hash value, so the server will tell user, okay, I'm now at the index n, the last hash value. So basically, the first password the user needs to supply is a pre-image of the last hash value. So which is the hash of password by n minus 1 times. Because if you hash the original password n minus 1 times, this becomes the pre-image of the hash of n times. Right? So this one becomes the pre-image of the password stored by the server. Right? So because you do the hash for n times, so the server keeps the last hash, and the pre-image for the last hash is the the n-1's hash. So this becomes the first password you need to log in. You can log in. So after you do use this password, of course you will throw away this password because it's one-time password. So now basically the server will now updates the counter from n to n-1. So the server now basically say, okay, the n's hash value has already been used. Now I update my stored the hash value to n-1 hash. Essentially the first one-time password. So now next time the user wants to log in, the user need to supply the n-2's hash. But the user actually don't need to store all those hash values. The user only need to store the initial one because it can produce all the remaining hash values by using the hash chain. Right? So you can repeat this process until you use up all the one-time password. Right? So maybe I can also draw a simple picture to illustrate this idea. Okay, so now basically you have an initial password. Okay, so this is the real password picked by the user. So you do the hash, you get hash 1, right? Hash 1 of the password. Then you do hash again, you get hash 2. You hash again, you get hash 3. Right? For example, here I just do the hash 4 times. So after we do the hash for 4 times, basically the user will store this original password. The server will store hash 4. So this is stored on the server. This is the client. Right? So to log in for the first time, basically the client needs to do hash, and now basically the client supply this one as the first one-time password. So this is the first one-time password, because if you give this value, the server will check whether the hash of this one is equivalent to this value. So if they are equal, that means this is a valid one-time password, right? So now basically the server will update the stored hash value from H4 to H3, right? So next time the user needs to log in, user will need to give this one. This one actually becomes a one-time password too, because the server again will check, okay, if hash of this one is equal to the updated hash value. If they are equal, this is the correct one-time password. So you always start from the end. The reason you cannot start from beginning is because if the first session you use this password and this password is leaked, then all the remaining passwords are leaked. But if you start from the end, if this one say when you do the login first time, use this one, but this one later leaked, the adversary actually cannot find H2 because of the what property of the hash? One-wayness, right? So this is a pre-image resistance. From the H3, if the one-time password 1 is leaked, an attacker cannot find the next one-time password 2, because this is a finding pre-image. And the hash is one way. You can only do it this way, but not the other way. So attacker cannot find the next one-time password. So this is how this Lamport one-time password works. So what's the last one-time password?
H2.
What is the last? This is the first one-time password. Second, third. What is the last one? Password. So the last password is the last one-time password. So if you use up all the one-time password, then unfortunately you need to start from beginning. You need to register a new. Pick a new password. You generate a new chain. Then you register with a new hash value. So that's the drawback. You need to restart this system if you use up all the one-time password. So the drawback of this one is you have limited number of one-time password to be used, and the good feature is here you only need to remember one password, because you don't need to remember all these hash values. You can generate all these hash values from the beginning, similar as in your assignment. You only need to remember this one. You can generate all the one-time password by doing the hash operation. Okay, so this is the Lamport one-time password system. Okay, so that's but this one is not the one-time password we use in reality. So later in the I think after we finish this part, we will look at how the real one-time password system actually is implemented. Right, so basically in the slides, similar as in our security subject, usually we use the Alice and Bob to represent like a client server, and we may use like a Mel or Eve, Oscar to represent the attackers. Right, so this is some tradition used in security research